In this video, we're going to be talking about a major storm system bringing snow, massive waves, and a fire hose of precipitation, and then a severe threat going into next week. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. Let's first of all take a look at the overall satellite picture this afternoon on October 19th. And we've got a winter storm warning out here into portions of Wyoming right now with some heavy snow. Then we also have a fire hose precipitation that's going to be impacting the west coast with some much needed rain and almost too much of a good thing out here into parts of Washington and Oregon and getting into parts of Northern California, with actually several systems back to back to back sending a relentless amount of precipitation over the next 7 days. So let's take a look at the overall guidance where we've been so far as like the temperature anomalies. And we talked about this southeast ridge going to be dominating over Canada. That's bringing all the well above average anomalies to the northern states through October the 18th. We've got all those troughs out here off the west coast. That's bringing the below average temperatures off the west coast, where it's predominantly been above average anywhere from the central and eastern 2/3 of the US. So is there any changes upon the horizon for the next 2 weeks? Let's take a look at the overall teleconnections and see where we stand, because you look at the overall PNA, which is your Pacific North American. It's been predominantly negative, and that's why all the troughs have been set up off the west coast. We try to go positive for a little bit, but it really doesn't get there. It stays neutral to negative really for the rest of the month, even going into first couple of days of November. But if we take a look at the EPO, which is your Eastern Pacific Oscillation, you can see why it's been so warm into the central and eastern 2/3 of the US, because the EPO is positive and we can't get this thing negative. Until it goes negative, we're not going to be able to get any kind of sustainable cold setting up into the eastern half of the US. We do see it get trends towards neutral right now, and that's why we're actually seeing even some of our coldest temperatures so far of the season. But predominantly over the next 2 weeks, we're actually seeing that trend remaining positive, and I do feel that's going to be the case going forward. So, but there is some light at the end of the tunnel, because if you go way up in the stratosphere, we're starting to see the beginning stages of a stratospheric warming event. So what that basically means is when the Arctic is warmer, it more or less displaces that some of that colder air way above up in the Arctic. Now these things take a while, so we're just literally at the beginning stages of an early stratospheric warming event. It may not be until sometime until the middle of November, so we get any of that cold air to kind of filter down into the US and filter down into the surface. But there are stages, at least beginning stages, of some big changes on the table as we go into November, with a little bit more sustainable cold in parts of the US. So I'll definitely be watching for that. So as we move forward and we go through the end of the month, you can definitely see on the latest GFS, this ridge continues to remain in place, even going into the first couple of days of November, predominantly where it's been so far for the month of October. But there are some signs, like I mentioned, this ridge gradually lifts further northward, and the further northward it's able to trend, it's going to be able to trend these troughs to sneak underneath on the underside and brings a little bit more cooler weather and more sustainable colder weather for the eastern 2/3 of the US. But predominantly for the next 2 weeks in October, I am still remaining to be above average, overall into the eastern 2/3, with these troughs setting up off the west coast with a little bit, higher impact, greater probability of, as we go into that first week of November, this ridge starts to lift a little bit further northward, allows this trough to sink underneath, bringing some of those cooler conditions off to the southeast as we get past, say, Halloween timeframe. But that is a long ways away. But before that, we got a lot of weather to talk about. Here's the setup for today, this afternoon, and that's why if you look at the vorticity model, we've got that one vorticity set up over Wyoming right now. Well, that's why they have those winter storm warnings in place right now with some heavier snow. But we also see a second one setting up off the west coast of the Pacific. That's going to set the stage for a 1-2 punch, if not a third punch, of rounds and rounds of precipitation, and they just get heavier. Because in fact, by the time we get into that Thursday time frame, that's when we see that big vorticity set up off the west coast. This is a massive drop in a millibars. You're talking anywhere from 40 to possibly upward to 50 millibar drop in a 24-hour time frame. That would classify as a what they call a bomb cyclone in this area. So this is an equivalent to a major hurricane, and this goes down all the way to a 953 millibar area of low pressure off the coast of the west coast. That's going to set the stage for some massive waves and a relentless amount of precipitation going to be impacting the Pacific Northwest and eventually impacting Northern California. So as we move forward, let's take a look at some of the wind swaths just over the next 90 hours from these developing low pressure centers. Yeah, we're talking 49-foot waves off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, even upwards to 70 feet out there. This is some massive waves that's going to cause huge swells along the coastal regions. So definitely be on the lookout for that, as these waves will be crashing ashore as we get into that Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday time frame, with that one system setting up on Thursday, and then a reinforcing shot coming in for early weekend. So there's numerous systems setting up, because by the time we get into that Sunday time frame, October the 24th, yet we have another system that's coming across into parts of Washington and Oregon and Northern California, as just a relentless amount of fire hose of precipitation is going to be impacting that region. And as we move forward, let's take a look at some of the anomalies over the next 7 days, and you can see where all the heavier precipitation is going to fly. They really haven't had much precipitation over the last 6 months in this region, so that's why this is kind of a rare event and a much needed event, but it's also too much of it at one time, and we're going to be seeing well above average precipitation anomalies for the next 7 days in this regions, with these triple effect of setups of vorticities coming offshore. So mainly along the coastal regions, they're going to be dealing with those heavier rains and higher wind gusts, and then very heavy swells along the coastal regions. But anywhere from 4 to 6 inches is on the table as we move over that 7 days. And then parts of Northern California, there's going to be isolated parts that could pick up almost up to 10 inches, if you can believe that, of heavy rain as we move forward. As it gets into the interior regions, you can see it kind of dwindles down. A lot of it transfers into the form of snow, but overall, for the rest of the regions, for the south and the southeast, it's going to be predominantly below average for the next 7 days. So if we take a look at the overall precipitation as far as how much rainfall that's going to equate to, yeah, we look at some of these oranges. That's again 5 to 7 inches is easily, and then those yellows are upwards to 10, if not 12 inches of rainfall in some of the isolated parts. As we get into those interior regions, yes, the precipitation does fall heavily, and a lot of it's going to fall in the form of snow. But you can see elsewhere, there's not technically too much going on, and this is over a 7-day time span. We do see a highlighted area that's going to be seeing some heavier rains, setting up with these troughs coming in into parts of Iowa, into Illinois, as well as Wisconsin and southern Minnesota here, is also getting into parts of Missouri. Going to see some heavier rain. But let's take a look at the wind swaths, because we're going to have to be dealing with some very high winds as these vorticities come across. So just like parts of last week where we dealt with those back-to-back huge storm systems, it's kind of the same setup we're going to be dealing with this week, with those heavier winds going to be coming across into parts of Washington and Oregon and Northern California, getting into Nevada, into Utah, into Idaho, parts of Montana, going into Wyoming, into Colorado, into Mexico here, getting into the panhandle of Texas, then eventually getting into parts of Nebraska and to Kansas, as well as Oklahoma. And this is just over the next 7 days. We do have a tropical system that's going to form off the coast of the Pacific, taking advantage of some of these warmer waters along the coast. But a lot of indications this is going to be hugging the coast and eventually probably head out to sea and not turn inland like Pamela did. So as we move forward and look at the snow, the heavier snow, this is where the heavier snow is going to fly. Mainly going to be in the higher elevations, but some of these totals are going to be impressive over parts of Montana here, getting into Idaho, especially into Wyoming over the next 7 days. And then west of Denver could be picking up double digits in the foothills again with some very heavy snow setting up. But now let's transfer to the severe threat, because as these systems come across and as they continue to push into the central part of the U.S., by the time we get into that 26th time frame late in the evening, we could be looking at a severe threat setting up parts of the plains again with this somewhat of a negative tilted trough coming in. So we could be setting up for another round of severe weather, and the latest GFS model kind of implies that by the 26th time frame, as these troughs come across, we could be looking at a severe threat setting up over portions of Nebraska, getting into Kansas and parts of Missouri by then. And this would just continue moving across into the east. And then by the 27th time frame, that same setup could be over Oklahoma again and parts of Missouri, getting into Kansas as well. And there's that little bit bigger, possibly severe threat. Again, this is a kind of a long ways out. I just want to give you kind of a guidance of what we're looking at this week and as well as next week, with that potential setup that eventually, with that fire hose precipitation out west, transferring to heavy snow, and then that severe threat as we get further into the plains. So places like Oklahoma again, where the last week they dealt with 3 systems back to back to back. And in fact, the National Weather Service just did all their calculations, and this is still not even the final total. But in fact, they did confirm 28 tornadoes, which was the highest on record for October, beating out 1998 of 27 tornadoes. So yes, we could be looking at a possible another severe threat for parts of Oklahoma, just be adding to those totals potentially as we end the month of October. So man, definitely a severe threat on the table as we get into the middle of next week. And then that same system would continue to move across into the east. And the Climate Prediction Center is already highlighted in the extended range of a slight risk of some heavier rains setting up and moving back into the southeast region. Now this is between the, like say, the 27th and the 29th time frame. This would be late next week. So but portions of Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, parts of Georgia, and western Tennessee could be looking at some heavier rainfall, if not possibly some severe weather for your neck of the woods as we get into late next week. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you value my content, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.